Well, hello, Forest Meadow. Welcome back to another episode of Sermon Reflections. And I'm so glad, as always, that you took the time to join us today. And if you have any questions about any of the stuff that we're covering, whether it's on Sunday morning or the Reflections videos, please just reach out and let us know. On another note, most of you know that this week is our VBS. So we would ask that you guys would please join us in prayer that many kids and also their parents would learn about Jesus this week. You know, they take these things home and ask their parents for help, and that's part of our desires, that they would learn. But other than that, let's go ahead and reflect upon Sunday's message of forgiveness. One of the most significant aspects of biblical forgiveness is that it is a work of the Spirit, not a work of the flesh. What this means is that we cannot truly forgive other people apart from God helping us to forgive. Not only this, but we also cannot forgive others without God doing a significant work inside of our hearts. And often this work takes place in three primary ways. You know, this isn't exhaustive, but it's helpful. So think about these three ways. The first thing that God must do is God must humble us under the weight of our own sin in light of His holiness. Number two, God must work character in us, like patience and endurance. And number three, God must work inside of us a humble compassion and tenderness for those who are caught in the snares of sin. Let's go ahead and look at the first one. God must humble us under the weight of our own sin in light of His holiness. When you consider this, if we do not understand God's holiness and the fact that we, apart from Christ, we deserve eternal condemnation, then forgiveness cannot really make any sense to us. Consider it even more. Forgiveness only makes sense when you have a clear understanding of sin. And sin only makes sense when you compare it to a holy God. But on the other hand, once we have seen God's holiness, once we have a clear picture of Him, then we can actually recognize the depth of our own sin against Him. And when we recognize that God's righteous judgment, it should have fallen upon us, but instead, God gave us mercy. God gave us compassion. He gave us grace instead of condemnation. Boy, there is a transformation that takes place in that moment. When we have received forgiveness in this way, we desire for other people to receive forgiveness in the same way. When we have been forgiven much, as Luke 7 mentions, we should also love much. And this is a transformative work, and it softens our hard hearts. It really does change us. When we see and when we recognize the power to forgive and to transform, this transforms not only us, but also other people. And the second thing, let's talk about the second thing that God works in us. It is character like patience and endurance. With this, we learn to bear with one another in weakness and in sin. You know, sometimes there's weakness, sometimes there's sin. Sin is always weakness, but weakness is not always sin. But often, God reveals the depths of our own sin. And when He does this, it becomes harder for us to throw other people under the bus because of the depth of their own sin. Now that we as believers have received a heart of flesh, like we talked about from Ezekiel, right? We have a soft heart. We begin to love other people and recognize how they also are sometimes ensnared by the evil one. And we have a desire now to help them rather than to condemn them. We know how easy it is for us to wrestle or to believe the lies of the evil one. And we endure with other people in their struggles, just as God endured our struggles. And then let's look at the third one. Number 3, God must work in us a humble compassion and tenderness for those who are caught in the snares of sin. We show others grace and forgiveness just as God showed us. We show them mercy and compassion. And why is that? Well, because we ourselves know what it's like to stumble into sin. You know, I'd never wake up saying I desire to fall into this today. But we know what it's like to be enslaved by the devil in one way, shape, or form. And we get to demonstrate to these other people the real gospel by forgiving sin and transgression. Consider this. When we do this, when we forgive other people as they sin against us, we demonstrate Jesus to them so clearly. They taste of his goodness, and then as a result, they desire also to walk in his ways. In other words, whenever we have the opportunity to forgive other people, then they have the opportunity to taste the fruit of the gospel in our lives. And they desire more of that same fruit. They get to see it, taste it, understand it. They see and understand the gospel as we forgive. The passage I would encourage you to read is all of Colossians chapter 3. That's what all that passage is about. Not only that, but Ephesians chapter 4 and chapter 5. Just beautiful things in those passages. Now, let's recognize this. It's not fun when other people sin against us. But this is our opportunity to show them that who Jesus is, what he did for them, how Jesus loves them. And then we can show them what the Lord expects and commands from all of us. And when these people, when they really truly taste of his forgiveness, they love him. They really do. The one who has been forgiven much also loves much. We see this in Luke chapter 7, verses 40 through 50. But if forgiveness is something that you struggle with, then it may be helpful. You have to come to the understanding of how holy God is and what God could have done with your sin, with my sin. You have to recognize that. He could have punished us for eternity. You have to come to the understanding of what God did with our sin. He forgave us. He let Jesus suffer and die. You have to come to the understanding of what God is doing in our own lives whenever people sin against us. He's bringing us to maturity. And we also have to understand that the same work that God did in us, transformative work of forgiveness, he also wants to do in others. If you cannot give grace to others, then perhaps it's because you need to receive more grace from him. As the quote says, "Never have I dealt with anything so difficult as my own soul." And I know from very much experience that I am truly the most spiritually needy person that I know. I know that I need more of Jesus. And I must remember that whenever someone demonstrates a lack of maturity, in whatever way that it is, just like myself, they also need more of Jesus. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our questions for the week. Our first question is this. What is the problem with counting transgressions? And what does it indicate when we count transgressions? And what scale are we trying to balance when we do this? Number 2, what is the depth of our sin and the hopelessness of our condition? And how does understanding or not understanding our own sin affect how we view the world, and why is all of this so important? Number 3, how can you know if you have truly forgiven someone from your heart? That is a powerful question to wrestle with in prayer with God. Number 4, why did the slave offer to work off his debt even though he knew it was impossible? What does this offer indicate about his debt and the master's forgiveness? Number 5, why did the master forgive the debt? And what enabled the master's forgiveness? And think about this one, and how does the incredible debt compare to the worth of the man? That's worth some discussion. Number 6, why did the master's forgiveness not affect change in the servant's heart? Number 7, what knowledge is required for true forgiveness to manifest in us? And what else might be required? Number 8, if we supposedly understand forgiveness, why are we still sometimes burdened with those feelings of unforgiveness? And what do we still lack? And how do we release that burden? And then finally, number 9, what does our struggle to forgive reveal about our relationship with God? Well, that's about all the time that we have for today. Just as a quick teaser, coming up this next week, we're going to be looking at the reason that God permitted divorce among the people of Israel. This answer may come as a surprise to many of us, but I hope that you would take the time to join us. Remember to be in prayer for us this week as it is our VBS. Continue to pray that the Lord would use this time to draw children and parents closer to himself. I want to say thank you for taking the time to dig deeper into the scriptures, and I hope that you have a great day. Thanks.